And if everything goes well, we don't have to go backwards.
Okay.
Recording. I'm going to go live on Facebook. 3, 2, 1. Hey, folks, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the U.S. or around the world. Somewhere I know you're listening because we've got over 100 countries listening to Baseball Outside the Box. I'm your host, Pete Caliendo, and thrilled to be with you today on December 12th, the Saturday evening, a little special edition, our international edition. We love going internationally because we can learn from anyone, anytime, anywhere in the world. In the game of baseball, as you know, there's over 110 countries. The gentleman I'm about to introduce to you is a great friend of mine, an American, but also an Italian, actually Italian-American, but now he's Italian. He's been there a long time. In 82, he went there to play, and he said he never expected to stay that long. Well, he stayed since 82. He'll tell you more about it in a minute. He also won as a shortstop, 81, was an NAIA Collegiate Champion, World Series with Grand Canyon University. And don't forget, he is also the MLB, for 20 years, the MLB consultant, not only in Europe, but around the world in game development. Now, there's a lot more to him. Oh, forgot to mention, folks, Old Time Baseball Player Association. He's not going to like this, of Wisconsin, in the Hall of Fame, because he's a modest guy, but he is in the Hall of Fame. He's a Hall of Famer, too. Let me welcome my good buddy, Dan Bonanno. What's up, Danny?
Hey, Pete, how are you? How you doing?
All right, doing good. Hopefully I didn't misquote any of those introductions there.
No, that was pretty spot on. I appreciate that.
I did a little homework on you. No, you know, the interesting part, before we even begin, you guys, you and I talked off the air. We're live on Facebook, folks. If you got any questions for Dan Bonanno, I see guys and gals joining already. Just type them in the comments section. That'd be great. And if you can't see us on Facebook, the reason being is because we're live on YouTube. So go to Peter Caliendo on YouTube, go live, and you can check us both out. So you can see Danny, because I know you want to see Dan more than you want to see me. He's the guest, so you want to get his perspective right when he's talking to you. And don't forget, this podcast also goes on Baseball Outside the Box live. Go to Baseball Outside the Box. Do us a favor, join us on the podcast, subscribe, and also subscribe on YouTube. That really helps us get the show out. Hey, Danny, like I said, we're off the air a little bit, and you know, you and I talked a long time, and you know, our good friend, I mean, not only great friend, but a brother in the game of baseball, Bill Holmberg, passed away just recently, kind of suddenly, at least for me. I know you were a little bit more in touch with him. Tell us about Bill and the loss that not only our great friendship has and everybody else, but what he's done for the game of baseball all over the world.
Yeah, you know, Pete, that was pretty devastating for the baseball community, especially for the Italian baseball community and the you know, the European baseball community. Bill, I you know, I met Bill in 1989. So, and we were, you know, we were colleagues since with Major League Baseball for about 17 years. So I traveled a lot with Bill, got to know him obviously very well. It was really a difficult time to you know, it was hard. I mean, it was really hard for everybody. He did, you know, Bill did what he wanted to do. He worked in baseball and taught baseball, taught throwing, taught pitching, you know, tried to mentor kids, which he did up until the end. You know, he wasn't feeling good toward the end, probably the beginning of the year. He was feeling a bit, he wasn't feeling great, but then, you know, it kind of caught up to him, and in August, it kind of took its toll on him. But, you know, Bill was he's like a brother. I mean, we traveled the world together. We ran clinics, we worked, we coached against each other. You know, he was like a brother to me. As a matter of fact, his birthday was the same day as my brother's birthday. So,
wow.
Yeah, so it was kind of incredible. But yeah, Bill will be missed, but he leaves a phenomenal legacy. You know, the premier pitching coach, premier man, you know, and he'll be sorely missed. You know, he did a lot for the academy system over there. He did a lot for, you know, the young players coming up, had through the academy, through Bill's instruction. I mean, he had quite a few players sign contracts, and, you know, he was really one of those guys who just, you know, lived and breathed baseball, you know. So, and he leaves a huge a huge gap. And, we're going to try to, maintain his legacy here on out.
Absolutely. And one way to maintain that is we are dedicating this show, as we have other shows, to Bill Holmberg, rest in peace, our friend and great brother. And I'm also dedicating a show to my mom, who passed away in November. Tough times, no doubt about it, for a lot of people out there, not just us.
Yeah.
The other thing I was going to tell you, Danny, was when I first met Bill, I think it was my first time speaking at the baseball convention in Italy. I think it was like 22 years old. So I'm not going to tell you how many years that was. But after I got done speaking, he approached me and we hit it off right away, man. It was easy. Became good friends, love talking baseball with him. As you said, I saw a big difference, folks. And if you can follow Bill Holmberg, he's got stuff on YouTube. He's on my podcast. There's a lot of areas you can follow him. He's done a lot of work for MLB. I saw a big difference because, I see all the Italian teams playing internationally. He's been on the World Baseball Classic team. He's been on the national team. He's had an influence. You saw a difference in the pitching and how close to, the national teams, how well they did when he was the pitching coach or had influence with the pitchers.
Absolutely. The thing about Bill was his main thing was he did not want everything he did for the pitchers was to avoid injury. So his whole philosophy was based on that. And if they followed his program, they followed the protocol there, very few, if any, guys really had serious arm injuries. So it was all about, protecting the players and getting the most out of them as he could. And, based on his philosophy and his methods for pitching, which he's had incredible success. Not only that, but he was a tremendous, his strategy, the way he approached the game and the way that he would pitch. I mean, his big thing in tournaments, the way he would approach tournaments, short, tournament baseball was his forte. I mean, he was great at that. Doing things backwards, pitching backwards, different strategy, knowing his players, knowing the other team. He'd scout. He was thoroughly prepared. And as teams won, I mean, he won a lot of European championships for the Italian team with the junior national team. And he did, he left a huge mark in a positive way in baseball.
Absolutely. Hey, I want to give a shout out. We got a lot of people on Facebook, but I do want to give a shout out to our good friend, Tim Leeper. Tim drinking some, it looks like Battle wine and listen.
That's our boy, Tim.
Hey, Tim, I already had wine. I had an espresso because I knew I was coming on the show with Dan. So I had to have an espresso. So a salute to all of us, right? And a salute to Bill Holmberg. We'll have a little drink for Bill Holmberg. Rest in peace, our friend.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, Danny, listen, I want to talk about another thing I want to talk about. I think that it is important. There's a lot of opportunities around the world, in many ways in the game of baseball. The game's really grown, right? Over 120 countries playing all over the world. More countries even trying to start federations. I just recently helped a lot for the last year and a half, Bhutan baseball.
Wow.
Which Major League Baseball is now helping also. And WBSC is going to try to, get them to be a federation, but it takes a little time. So that it's some great things happening there. You went to Italy right after college, I believe. And you said that, I'm not, I wasn't really playing. I just wanted to play some baseball, see what it's like, then come back home. But talk about what happened with you and the opportunities out there, because a lot of players, they don't understand. They might go play overseas somewhere, but other things could spring up from that.
Oh, absolutely. When back then, I mean, the Italian league had 24 teams in it. So there were 2 divisions of 12. So everybody, we, guys like myself who didn't play professionally here, and after college, luckily I had Italian, I am an Italian American, and I qualified for an Italian passport. So that helped me get over there to play as an Italian, an oriundo, they call it. So, I always wanted to do that because once school was over, I really wasn't ready to go to work. And I said to myself, you know what, and I felt like I could still play a little bit. And, I just wanted to, I had the travel bug. I wanted to get over to Europe, just to see the world a little bit and, meet some, different people and see what was happening over there before, I came back and started working here. So 1 year became 2. And then then 2 years became 23. And then I thought, well, maybe I could play till I'm 30. That's how it worked out. So luckily I was able to do that. And then I played in Nettuno near Rome, and then I played in Milan for a year, and then I played in a town near Rimini for 5 years. And then I was able to stay overseas. I met, my wife, and I have 2 boys over there. And then I, had a chance to stay involved in baseball, work in Italian industry, coach. I coached for 13 years before I started working with Major League Baseball in 2000. But the nice part about it, Pete, was, you get to meet a lot of people, and the experiences were great because not only were the opportunities in baseball there, but, the business side of it, work side of it was also interesting because, having, my mother tongue is English. So a lot of the Italian companies would want guys like myself to go travel and sell, to get involved in sales and things like that. So that opened up other doors in terms of, travel and seeing the world. But obviously all of us went there to play baseball, and we were lucky enough to stick around. And, it just, again, I wasn't really, the plan wasn't to stay this far away from this area, from where we are, but, you play the cards you're dealt.
Yeah, and you never know where life brings you, folks. Always take that opportunity. There's some great opportunities out there. As we talk about Italian baseball, Danny, here's the other part. Obviously great place, great country. I think it's one of the greatest. I'm biased because it being an Italian American, my parents born there, been there 40 times. I love Italy. But when we talk about Italian baseball, talk about, before we get into the international part, talk about, first of all, longest tenure, probably you and Mike Romano, I got to guess. Bill Holmberg's probably in that too, but also talk about the development of the game there, how that's working, what they're trying to do to develop the game in Italy, to grow it more and more. I know it's not easy, but they've been playing there for a long time.
Yeah, they've been playing for many, many years. I think the 1912 or 20 or something like that was the first time that baseball was introduced, and that was up in Milan. And then obviously in World War II, in Nettuno and Anzio, when the Allies landed there, they brought baseball bats and balls. So Nettuno is the baseball, they claim to be the baseball capital of Italy, and they do a wonderful job down there. But the positive thing about Italian baseball is they have a very, very solid Olympic committee, and baseball being an Olympic sport obviously helps. So that's an incentive for federations to do well internationally. So if they can, qualify for the Olympics, then they get more funding. But the way the Italian baseball situation is set up, you have a lot of local governments and local politicians that baseball was kind of a novelty back in the 70s, mid 70s. That's when it all really started to pick up. And they built, 400, there are 400 fields in Italy, and 100 of them have lights. So they're pretty good. There's pretty decent facilities. Now, it's kind of lost its luster the last few years, the baseball really boomed in the 80s, and that's, with the help of all the import players and the Italian American guys that came over, they built relationships with the local guys and with the local people and the local clubs. And that was able to, they piggybacked off of that. And then things changed a little bit in the 90s. There's always, issues with money. There were money problems, there were sponsorship problems. Right now, and they had very solid federations back then, and they also had solid funding. But then the funding started to dry up. The novelty kind of wore off. So the local clubs and the local regions had to kind of fend for themselves. So what they did was they had teams would go under, teams would not be able to survive, teams merged, but they did all they could to maintain it and to, to go forward with their own, under their own, power. But right now, what's going on over there is they're doing a lot more in development in terms of regional academies and national academies. So going back to Bill, Bill was the director of the Italian Academy in Tirrenia. And that was an extremely successful program. Major League Baseball played a huge role in that. And having Major League Baseball there gives federations and clubs and players that much more incentive, So Major League Baseball really played a big role in getting the raising the visibility of Italian baseball and European baseball. And the Dutch and the Italians, and now the Germans are coming up. They all have had very pretty remarkable success, internationally. So right now baseball has been it's a struggle. They're having a tough time trying to find sponsors, and there are only about 8 teams in the league now, from 24 way back in the day to about 8 now in the Series A league. So, and they're trying to change that, obviously. There's a lot of competition out there with soccer. There's a lot of competition out there with other sports, and that's just the nature of the beast in Italy.
Speaking about that, because, funding is always an issue at a lot of places around the world, and they're always trying to figure out sponsorships or ways to raise money and all that.
Yeah.
The other part, and before I get to it, I remember the 70s, that was the Lenny Randall years. Those were when the 70s and 80s, when they used to get 5,000, 6,000 fans a game, right? I remember.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You mentioned that it's gone down to eight at the professional league, at the highest league.
Right.
But, in order to grow the game, we both know that, yes, you need money, but you also need grassroots. And you got to get to the young kids. You got to keep them in the game longer. Coaches' education is important. But in Europe and Italy, they have to recruit players, like you said, because they're playing soccer also. They got to figure out how to get them.
Yeah.
Talk about maybe what the Italians might be doing, because, most of our listeners internationally know that it's a club level. There's clubs. Every team has a club, from young kids all the way up, and some don't have them in the middle and all that, but some might have young kids, some might have older, just depends on their area. But talk about what they're doing to try to get kids to play the game.
Yeah, well, you're right. It's a club-based system, and it's not, very easy to find players. So you have to go into schools, and that's what they've been doing. Now they're starting to do, I mentioned before, regional academies. Because obviously it's very expensive. People, kids, players in Europe have to play more. That's a big problem. We talked about this a lot during our camps, over the course of the years. The number one thing really is coaching. You've got to have competent coaches. Soccer has that, and the advantage that soccer has is they can incentivize coaches economically. There's economic incentive for really good players who turn into be good coaches. There's an economic incentive there from the local clubs because they obviously can pay their coaches. So, it's hard to justify being away from home, especially, if you're married and you're not making any money, spending all your time, in the afternoon or on weekends and, all summer long. And soccer has that they have that advantage. But the Italians, what the Italians are starting to do now is they're starting to develop regional academies, which I think is the way to go. It's a winning proposition because, the 12, 13, 14-year-olds can stay home. The academy, when the academy was founded, I think it was in 2005 in Tirrenia, we would get, players that were high school aged, and we started with pitchers and catchers. So that was a little bit, it was kind of reduced, the based on budgets as well, because you couldn't get everybody in there. So you had to start somewhere. But that was more an elite kind of initiative. Now what they're trying to do is get, obviously, numbers. You have to get more kids playing. You have to make sure that it's easy for them to get to the ballpark. It's easy for them to get, good well, I shouldn't say it's easy to get good instruction, because it's not. It's difficult. You want to make sure that the people that are coaching these kids, the coaches, are actually, competent. And that can be a problem at times because, you're finding guys who are available, and that's where the economic incentive comes in. But that's a completely different discussion, I think.
Yeah.
What they're trying to do is they're trying to create regional academies around the baseball playing areas. There's a lot of opportunity in the southern part of Italy because of the economics down there. But it's hard to get into certain places because of the provincial kind of mentality they have over there. But there are some really solid hotspots like Emilia Romagna, where we live. Milano. Up in Ronchi, up near the Slovenian border. There's some really solid, clubs up there and solid organizations that are running their academies, and they have good coaches there too. But it's kind of a, it's not like throughout the country. There are pockets where it's really strong, and then there are other places where baseball is being played, but it's just not a quality type of environment. Like if you go to San Marino, you go to Rimini, you go to Nettuno, you go to Parma, you go to up in Ronchi, they're really good players up there. Rovigo, where Lucio Taschin is, he does a fantastic job. Verona, there's a lot of youth programs around, but they're kind of sparse, So the federation now, though, is they're doing more, they're trying to do more school-based initiatives, I believe. And that's obviously important, but the problem there is you have to make sure if you're going into a school and teaching kids baseball, it just can't be a one-off afternoon event. They have to have a place to go once you introduce them to them. So that's another thing, so you have to make sure that if they're interested in baseball, they can go to a club that's nearby where they live and play. So a lot of local clubs will go into the more advanced ones, I guess the more organized ones, will go into their local schools and do that. Like we know near Rimini, there's a town called Torre Pedrera, and they have a very, very good youth program, very good. But they've got, Davide Sartini, he goes into the schools. He's actually in there. They're in there recruiting, and then they pull kids out, and they provide a really nice baseball environment, and that's the incentive you need.
Somebody that's been really helping Italian baseball here in the U.S., want to give him a shout out. Good friend of yours. I've just got to know him pretty good. Joe Gualiano, the president and co-founder. Danny's on their advisory board, I believe, and co-founder of the Italian American Baseball Foundation. They've done some great work here in the States, Danny. They obviously traveled to Italy. They're helping out a lot. They seem like a great organization. Really enjoyed having them on the show. And you might want to, is there something you wanted to say there?
Well, Joe, it's a noble cause, what they're doing. They really are sincere in what they're doing. They involve, high profile people, Mike Piazza's involved, Mike Pagliarullo, they got all these, Lee Mazzilli, Frank Catalanotto, there's a bunch of guys, I can't name them all. And they've got a really good, board and they do a lot of really good things. They're pretty far reaching because they have a lot of contacts and they do a fantastic job. You can't say enough about what Joe's doing. I mean, he's passionate about it. He's sincere. I mean, he really wants to do good,
And that's the key. You could tell that they're sincere. I had him on the show along with John Franco, who I believe is
John's great.
And I believe he should be, hopefully inducted in the Hall of Fame one day.
Yeah.
Unbelievable numbers. And that could be debated. I understand that, but I've seen other guys in there that with less numbers, but that'll be another story for later on.
Right.
Hey, I want to jump to this because these here again, two key areas that you mentioned, but I think we need to talk about them. One, it'd be interesting to find out when you were going to the schools or when you saw some of these coaches going to schools, to attract kids. Baseball's not an easy game to attract kids. Because it could be initially it could be interesting because they get a bat and they got to try to hit a ball, so they like that. I get that part, but if they don't do that well, they're gonna go back to soccer or something else. That's a lot, not a lot easier, but different skill.
Yeah.
So what would you recommend? How would you if you went to a school, what would you do to entice those kids? Or what did you see coaches do that would really entice those kids?
Well, that's a really good point because they didn't do the right things a lot of times.
Right.
Who does it right, Pete? Are the Dutch.
Mm-hmm.
The Dutch do it right. They've got this game called b-ball. It's not baseball. You don't have 9 kids and then, you have some kid trying to throw and the right fielder standing out there and nothing's going on. They've got a game called b-ball. and it's different bases. I don't know the ins and outs of it, but I've seen them play, and it's fun. It's fast, there's, I think, 3 bases,
Mm-hmm.
something like that. You run, it's like a triangle type thing. I shouldn't
Yeah.
say because I don't know,
No,
but you can find all the information on the internet, and they do a great job. And the WBSC too, they're starting with the baseball 5, right?
yep.
That's another great introductory way for baseball.
And I think that's the key, because that's fun stuff. Like we've always said on the show, whether you bounce a ball and hit it with your hand and then play 5-on-5 or 4-on-4, or you take a bat like this, the Kenko bat, big bat, right? Big barrel.
Right.
This is like a light as a feather.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you got a big ball this big, and the kids are 5 years old. They're going to hit a lot. They're going to have a lot more fun, right? Because it's a smaller field. And that's my point, is what, ideas of what coaches can do in order to track, because if you don't get them that day at that school, you've lost.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, a lot of times coaches overcoach too. I mean, they're trying to do too much. There's so much information to know, with baseball. I mean, you can't get too detailed right away. You just they want to have fun. That's the number one thing. And they also they need to like the person who is introducing baseball to them. It's gotta be one of those engaging kind of things. You just can't go in there and start being, getting too technical. You just can't do that. There's so many rules. There's so many, people still don't understand that there's no time, limit.
Right.
They still don't, people in Italy will say, well, when you play, did you throw or did you run? Did you throw or did you hit? You say, well, both. How do you do both? So it's odd.
Hey, don't give anybody any ideas, because with the game's already starting to change. All of a sudden I can see it. There's going to be a time limit now, right?
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. Start people on second base, the whole thing. Yeah, right.
Hey, listen, and I think it's an important area to stick with a little bit, because I mean, let's just take something else. Let's take, all of a sudden you're at a school, you got to throw the ball, right? And you got a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, the ball's too big in their hand, and I get it. You got to at least tell them one thing, something that you got to, maybe turn and throw or something. But all of a sudden the coach starts getting into do this and do that and move your body. You just lost them.
Right. Absolutely. And again, going back to Bill, our pal Bill, that was the number one thing. If you can't throw, you really can't play. You have to learn how to throw. And unless you're a tremendous hitter, and there's 30 positions for DHs, that's about it in the major leagues. But if you can throw, you have a chance to play somewhere. So that's why we stressed a lot on throwing, because people in Europe, for example, they grew up playing sports with their feet. They don't play with their hands. If they're basketball players, yeah, obviously, but they don't, and the majority of the people play soccer. So it's foreign to them to take a ball and try to throw it. They don't know how to hold it even. So that's the number one thing. You've got to go and get them, show them how to throw. You have to show them the right mechanics, how to throw, so you don't get hurt. And then you move into hitting, because everybody wants to hit and everybody wants to run. So that's another thing. So the throwing aspect of it's really important. And then, of course, the hitting aspect is important, because that's where you get them, because that's what they want to do. They want to hit.
And I think that's the key. If you get the hitting part in there, now they say, oh, wow, this is fun. I want to go do more. Now you show them what club to go to, and things are rolling better. And it's never easy, because like you said, they're still competing with soccer.
No.
Another thing that you brought up, I thought was real important. It's interesting. The difference between Italy, I'm going to use, but possibly Europe in general, some areas in Europe, and the US, because, here you are, you're going, hey, we need to play more. Hey, we're saying we need to play less, and we need to practice more, because we do play too much in the US. It's kind of a different realm.
Yeah, it's a different level, complete level.
Now, what can, so the Italians or anywhere else, because I think countries can learn from each other, what can they do to play more games? But now remember, you can't travel, because you're during the week, you got school, you got work for the older guys, so you can play on weekends. But if you had to play more games, are there any recommendations out there to give players more game experience?
Well, sure. I mean, during the week when they practice, normally over there you play on the weekends. They practice Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Some teams or some leagues now will play on Wednesdays if they're close to each other. They need to go and play, even if they're playing, the lower league team. You can play inter squad games. You can have your pitchers thrown against, your hitters. You know what I mean? There's a lot of things you can do, but what we mean when we say they have to play more, for example, you might have a really good little shortstop in Italy, right? Good little player. He's really good, but
Mhm.
you're just not going to compete with guys in the Dominican or the United States they play all the time and they have it in their blood, you know. So you have to have them have more reps, more game experience. The practice, I always use the analogy, Pete, of like, you go to play golf, you go on the driving range and you never get on the course.
Yeah.
You're just hitting balls all day.
Yeah.
That's
Which is
no fun.
different.
Yeah,
Right.
it's completely different. And baseball's the same thing. Well, you might have a good weekend and all of a sudden you have to wait till Friday to play again.
Yeah. That's
And you lose it when you're, a hitter. But they just have to play more. So we started changing a little bit of our philosophy, just a little bit, because we had because of Bill too, because Bill was such a good pitching coach, is that we thought, you know what, the pitchers don't have to play every day. They have to have good mechanics. They have to be strong, and they can work out more because that's what pitchers do. If you have a decent arm, you can pitch 1.5 games a week and you're still on track, you know, whereas a position player has to play. That's just how it is. And, so, how you do that, you just get, you play more inter squad games, you play
Mhm.
more local clubs, you just play more games and get them into game situations.
Absolutely. I think that's the key in Europe is more game situations. There's
Yeah,
many ways to do that. I even think you could throw umpires behind it to make it more realistic.
sure.
Maybe you got just anybody behind home plate calling balls and strikes. Could be a player also,
Yeah,
because sometimes you got to learn how to deal with bad calls. So why not get bad calls at a
right.
practice,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
I mean, so
Sure,
you
sure.
try to create that atmosphere. The other part in Europe, Danny, is and in Italy too, is you have to deal with all of a sudden maybe you make the national team and then you got to go play internationally, but you got to deal with velocity. That's an
Right. Oh, that's
uh,
huge. Yeah,
yeah.
that's a big issue.
How do you catch up to that? What are the national teams maybe, and maybe you may not be around them as much, but what are the national teams doing to kind of combat that and prepare for that?
Well, it's hard, it's hard because not everybody over here, everybody throws 98, everybody.
Right.
It seems like that now.
And
But
Danny says over here because he's currently in the U.S.
right, in
He made it here,
Wisconsin.
visiting family, and hopefully we'll get a chance to see each other. But go
Yeah.
ahead. I'm sorry, Dan.
No, anyway, no, what they were doing, they have really good equipment now. They've got good pitching machines, all that. So they just crank it up. That's all you
Yeah,
can really do, and try to, at times what they'll do is they'll shorten up the distance between the pitcher, and the hitter. That basically that's all you can do. You try to
yeah.
throw as hard as you can from a shorter distance and then move back. And there's a lot of different ways to do that.
And that's what coaching's about, right? Trying to figure
Yeah,
out ways that you're trying to develop your team better,
right.
especially for game situations.
Yeah,
Listen, the other thing is coaching is so important. You mentioned it earlier, coaching development. MLB's done a lot of coaching development programs around the world.
yeah,
Um, what's a good coaching development program? Like in Italy, they've got a coaches education program.
right.
And I don't know exactly how it's organized. If it's a national program, but it's important for the federations to have a good program, I believe, where coaches are consistently being educated. You can't just
Yeah,
do one clinic a year and say, come to the clinic and you'll learn a lot. That's
no,
okay. But
yeah,
you got to be consistent. And I get it. They're volunteers. So I'm going to preface it with a lot of these guys and gals are volunteers.
right.
But there's got to be a way to do that regionally. There's got to be a way to do it on Zoom. There's so many different ways now to educate coaches.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, you've been to the Italian Coaches Convention. It's a pretty big event. That's a pretty big, high budget event. But, they do have a coaching commission. Um, I don't honestly know all the ins and outs of what they do all during the course of the year. I know this European Federation has their coaching commission too, and
Right.
we
And
would use a lot of. Yeah, go
what would
ahead.
your recommendation be? Let's see what would you like
Well,
to see if you were, they asked you, Dan, we have this educational program. What would you recommend to them doing possibly? Maybe some advice even for other
Well,
countries.
it's the same. It's the same for coaches and as it is for umpires. You have to go out and coach more. You have to get out there more. You have to learn. For example, Major League Baseball had some really good, solid, coaching guidelines. So we had that, and that was followed by the academy, for example. But the
Mhm.
point is, I think, Pete, is you got to have the people around you buy into the program. They all have programs, they all have coaching manuals, they all have ways to do certain things, but you know how coaches are. You got to have people that are buying into your program.
Yeah, you got to
Your
sell.
coaches, because especially in Italy, for example, it's the same everywhere. It's not just Italy, but I mean,
Good
it's like
point.
that everywhere. You've got, different regions who have different people, who have different mindsets, who have different goals, and they're going to teach their way. That's all
Yeah.
is to it, because you don't know what you're talking about, right? So no, I'm doing it this way because I've had some success, and that's it. And then you read what you can read, and you try to, keep your edge that way. But I think if people would collaborate a little bit more, it would be much easier if they had more coaching clinics, if they had more, opportunities for these. We had some really good programs with Major League Baseball, that we would go to South Africa, for example, and have a coaches. The program was it was like a coaches seminar. There were workshops, and the federations and the countries that really agreed with what we were doing showed up in droves. I mean, it was really, really good. And then they would go back. South Africa is a really good example, because they would go, and the Czech Republic, the guys in the Czech Republic are doing a fantastic job. They're all really, intertwined. They really want to see baseball grow in their country, and they collaborate all the time. So they have coaching clinics, they run academies, they run camps, but everybody's got to be on the same page. You've got to have a comprehensive program that people will buy into, and that's hard to do. It's hard to do sometimes, but it depends on the mindset, what the goal is. The collective goal. If the goal is to have a solid national team and put your country on the map, and then there's some guidelines that you have to follow, that's going to be a winner. But if you don't have that, you have guys that are short-sighted and they just want to win their league, then that's another issue.
Danny,
yeah.
No, the other thing I wanted to mention too was, sometimes we do get away from the fundamentals, and I understand the fundamentals are important. The skill development is important.
Yeah.
Long-term development of a program, what your long-term goal is important. And yes, we want coaches to work on the kids' skills and development, obviously. What are some of the things that were emphasized at some of the MLB camps that are critical to development of players, something that's consistent?
Well, again, you have different hitting philosophies. You have different, practice philosophies. But I think overall, it got to the point where if you have a kid who's a good player, you don't have to talk to him too much. Let him, if he's having some success, let him go. You have to teach, if somebody has up some type of blatant flaw that you need to fix, you have to work with them a little bit more, but you have to identify that. If you have a kid who's really good and he's having success, maybe not a really good example, but let's say he hits off his front foot. He's a front foot hitter, let's say. And he's having success. Why would you want to change him to hit off his back foot or change what he's doing?
Right.
Hank Aaron hit off his front foot. Guys, and then Joe DiMaggio, let's say there's old school guys, but they drove their knee right into the ground. But they all had success. So you just kind of let them go. You have to identify what they do. That's an issue. And, guys would, Steve Finley was a really is a very good hitting coach. And he would teach a certain way how to carve the ball, drive the ball, a lot of different philosophies. Rod Carew was tremendous. We had a lot of guys. I mean, Tim Leeper is a great coach. Garth Orge, great coaches. Barry Larkin, Lee Smith was there. Bruce Hurst. We had all these guys, and everybody has their own way to look at things. Everybody had different kinds of success, but I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that you have to identify what needs to be worked on for individual players, because some kids might need work on certain aspects of their game where another guy doesn't. So if he's having success, let's let him go. Let him play. Let him do his thing.
You've been over 20 years consultant for MLB International on game development. So, game development, I'm assuming as we're talking here, it includes coaching. You've seen the game around the world, the development of the game around the world. When it comes to coaching, you just gave some advice, but I'd love to hear some more advice on what you think possibly coaches are doing well, but also what they're maybe not doing as well as they should.
Yeah.
Want to kind of hit both those areas to see, just in general, what, and you mentioned just right now, one of them was, sometimes we talk too much and we don't listen enough,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
right? What
Yeah,
are
I
some
think, I think the way it is now, I think the way baseball is now, a lot of it there's a lot of, there's exit speed and spin rate and all kinds of things. I think a lot of coaches, have to kind of stay on top of the, how things are progressing in baseball in terms of, the analytics and things like that. Although a lot of guys don't really, I mean, the old school scouts, and it's changing now. So I don't know, I guess you might try to, want to stay up on certain aspects of the technology side of it, but I don't know. I honestly don't know, because everybody has, there are good young coaches, there are good older coaches, and everybody has their own style. And I think what coaches are doing is that the good ones are able to, on a certain level. I'm not talking about, amateur level, younger kids, but they just know how to manage people, manage these guys, get the best out of them, help them, let them know they're there for them when they need them. But, a professional player has a pretty good idea of what he's doing. And a lot of times it becomes psychological. You have to almost be like a psychologist at times.
absolutely.
But for kids, it's different. You have to identify their skill level, and you have to apply, certain, drills and certain, programs based on their level, on their skill level.
And that's a great point, because I was just going to ask that. We're talking about, all of a sudden you're in South Africa and there's a coach that maybe teaches, 10-year-olds,
Yeah.
and might also teach 18-year-olds. Some of the advanced stuff might be good for the 18-year-olds, but it may not be so good for the 10-year-olds. And you may have to identify those aspects of it,
Yeah.
because with technology, with all the information we're getting nowadays, it's not easy for a coach out there. And I think we have to understand what levels they're teaching also, and what level
Yeah.
that coach might be at, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There's a lot of technology out there, a lot of, different ideas. I think, I think going back to Bill again, Bill is fresh in our memory. He had a philosophy and he stuck to it, but he wasn't rigid enough that he wouldn't listen to anybody else. He had a thing that he was successful with. His players didn't get hurt. His players thrived. His players got better. Some of his players went on to sign contracts, but he stayed true to his philosophy. And when things didn't work or something kind of went sideways, he would adjust it. Had an open mind. You have to have an open mind when you're coaching. You can't just, be closed-minded and say, this is how I've always done it. This is how it should be done. And that's it. I don't want to hear anybody else's, it's not good. I think you need to be open-minded, And
Danny, what else, speaking about MLB, because they have such a big influence around the world, what else are they doing when it comes to game development? I know you've worked the elite camps, but what else are they doing to kind of grow the game? Because I'm assuming one of their goals is to grow the game worldwide.
yeah. Oh yeah.
For 'em.
Yeah, Major League Baseball is great. I mean, Major League Baseball has a huge impact, and the very active now in game development. Now there's softball involved too, so it's more of a global kind of initiative where there's more programs in the U.S., for example, in the inner cities are trying to get people to play baseball. They're getting into certain areas to try to drum up interest in baseball. It's a little bit, well, not a little bit, it's an easier sell here than it is in Europe. I can basically speak for Europe, but what Major League Baseball has done in Europe is remarkable, really. The incentive of the World Baseball Classic is huge. That's a great tournament. It's unfortunate this year was such a tough year for everybody, but the London series was going to happen. The Cubs and the Cardinals this year in London. That's a huge event. And it's just really raises the profile of baseball around the world. Last year we were in London for the Yankees and the Red Sox. I mean, that was like, 2 days of just solid baseball and a lot really high level, organization and things like that. But in terms of grassroots, Major League Baseball identifies people, meaning academies, local federations that want to work with us. If you're willing to collaborate and work with Major League Baseball, the door is open. They want baseball to thrive, and it's not like you can just start saying, "Oh, give us $100 million and we'll develop baseball for you." It's not like that. But what they do is they identify solid organizations and help, whether it be, when we run our camps, we leave a lot of equipment, we leave a lot of uniforms, a lot of printed materials, incentive to learn and things like that. And if we have a successful camp, we'll come back. That's all there's to it. If you want to, we will put you on the schedule, in the program. And if you want to do it, we'll be back. And so Major League Baseball is doing a lot in Europe now. I'm talking about Europe, we've had these camps and these elite camps for years. And, but, obviously, things do change, objectives change. You have to, obviously tweak a little bit some of the programs because they can get stale, at times. Maybe some of them get a little bit top heavy. It gets a little bit too big. You have to kind of refocus and organize what you're doing. And that's what we do. It's a consistent, it's always evolving. So what we try to do is we try to take the best out of every camp, and try to enhance that aspect and maybe add something else based on, what our needs might be. So, Major League Baseball now is with this pandemic, it messed up everybody. But we'll see what 2021 brings.
Hey, I'm going to throw a curveball to my buddy, Dan Bonanno. We're going to throw him a curveball, see if he can hit the curveball. Folks, on the show, if you listen, and, like I said, we're fortunate to have listeners in over 100 countries. What's interesting is, and I say throw a curveball, what I mean by that is we don't script the show, and everybody knows that. We love to just go at it and, just talk baseball and come up with ideas to help anybody, whether it be coaches or players or parents, whether it's in the US or anywhere around the world. So here's a question for you. You're commissioner of baseball in all of Europe. It's now the US. It's like the US. You're familiar with USA baseball and you're familiar with European. So you're the commissioner of all of Europe when it comes to baseball. What would you implement to help game development? What would some changes you might make? It could be anything, that you could think of. Changes you might make, and you got carte blanche. In other words, you make the change and they got to do it.
Okay.
What would be some of those areas? That'd be fun to hear.
Well, what I would do is I would have do kind of like a Champions League concept. And what I would do also is to link all the countries together, contact the Major League Baseball organizations, and it would be kind of like an independent league, a feeder league for MLB. You know what I mean? Yeah. So basically what you would do, because it would, the players even in Europe have to have an incentive. The prize is making it to the major leagues or playing in the US. So I would be, if I was a commissioner of European baseball, I would get close to the WBSC and I would get close to Major League Baseball first. And what I would try to do is to collaborate and be like, be a development league, like an independent league, but it would be affiliated, because a lot of times what happened, Pete, over the years was there were some kids at our camps that were good, but we didn't know where to send them. A scout would say, I like that kid, but where do I send him? Where does he go? Where can I can't send him to Australia. I can't send him to the Dominican. He's not ready. I can't send him to the US. He's surely not ready. So maybe we'll try to, and then, they want to sign him, but they really can't because they don't know where to send them, depending on the age. So what I would do is I would try to have create a league to incentivize, local clubs, local sponsors, and, try to create a development league where guys could stay at home and play and travel. I don't know if it would be 160 games, but it would be one of those leagues where you're going to play all the time and, be a feeder system for, the professional leagues.
Yeah, love it. We may see that one day. And I know there's coaches shouting out there. I see Randall Arms, our good friend, he's shouting coaches education. We've talked about coaches education a lot. Obviously, that's a big deal. But since
and that's another thing, excuse me, Pete, I don't mean to interrupt, but that would be another incentive for coaches.
Yeah.
Can you imagine, you're a coach, you want to get better and you're going to be involved in a league like that. You're rubbing shoulders with professionals, professional organizations, Major League Baseball, the European Baseball Federation. Everybody's got to work together, because if you're splintered, it's not going to happen.
Absolutely. I want to give a shout out to Ron Maestra, a good friend, Hall of Famer.
There he is.
College coaches ever on Facebook. Hi, Ronnie, and also an ISG board member. Man, what a legend. Talk about a legend in baseball.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another good Italian American.
That's right. That's right. The more the merrier.
Hey, since they mentioned coaches, I just want to go down the grassroots a little bit. Here you are, commissioner of European baseball. And folks, if you just joined us, he's not commissioner of European baseball. In that example, if he was one day, at the grassroots level, what changes would you make? Any changes there, whether it be coaching or something in the game, something kids should be doing differently? And I'll give you an example. Here in the States is easy. I would reduce certain areas and certain ages where they're playing way too many games. Like you got 10-year-olds playing, 90 games, 80 games.
Yeah,
no. They're not even practicing that much. And we know countries around the world, I'm just going to mention it because we've stressed it so much on the show, and I continue to stress it. As we travel the world, Cuba, Latin America, whether it's Cuba or other countries, whether it's Japan, some of the top countries, and I know the U.S. is a top country, so I don't want people to misunderstand this. But remember, we've got, and I emphasize this, we got 26 million amateur baseball players in the U.S. Okay, so we got great coaches, we got great programs. I get it. We're going to have great players. But what I'm seeing at smaller countries that don't have our numbers, the good ones, they're practicing more. Now, they still play more games because in Latin America, they're playing 100 games or whatever they play, but they practice twice as much as they play. That's what I would change here in the U.S. at the grassroots level. So just to give you an idea. So in Europe, if you're a commissioner.
Yeah, well, I would do that. I would implement the model you just said. Practice. You have to practice. You have to find a happy medium, because kids playing 12-year-olds playing 90 games. I mean, that's crazy. But then in Italy, or in Europe, 12-year-olds playing 9 games. You know what I mean? That's a problem. So you have to find a happy medium there. And repetitions, and then you got to get them out there and playing in meaningful games. But it's a tough one, because the economic incentive is a component. The numbers, pure numbers, is a really important component. Soccer's got the pick of the litter. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. They can go anywhere and get players, and it's the players are interwoven in the society. I mean, not necessarily you get players that aren't maybe economically advantaged. You get players from families that are, professional people that play soccer. I mean, everybody does, and they thrive. I mean, they make it to the top leagues. But the grassroots, I think you'd have to dial it down, Pete. You have to go and find really strong local clubs that are already going in the schools, but you have to get them together, and you have to provide something to them, whether it be material, printed material, or actual equipment, or a coaching guideline that everybody has to buy into. Mm-hmm. You want to be part of this? This is what we teach. Because the problem is, you can change if you don't have a template. Then you change coaches, and you're going to change philosophy, and you're going to change what people are teaching, and you're just going to confuse the players a lot of times, especially the young ones. Mm-hmm. I've seen it happen a lot, where a guy will come over and say, I really liked him. He taught me this way, and I'm going to do that. And then another guy comes in and says, well, maybe you should do it this way. And everybody gets confused. You have to have a standardized, I think, at least a template. And then, once you get a little older, then you can identify, the skill level of the player. And then you just, you hone in on that. you know?
Love it, love it. And I tell you why I love it is because as we see consistency around the world, because I think when you see consistent programs develop and get better, you mentioned the Czech Republic. That's one that's been pretty consistent in coaches' education. But when you look at the countries around the world, you look at Australia, Canada, Cuba, Japan, US. In some ways, the US has got to do a better job, and they're trying to. They're really, because it's so big, it's kind of fractured in different areas. So they're trying to work together. MLB is doing a good job on that and developing coaches. That's what you see consistent in it. It's a consistent educational program in those countries, and you see more success because of that.
Well, absolutely. Pete, another thing too is, Jeff Crushell. You had Jeff on your show. Jeff's a premier strength and conditioning coach. He's a sports scientist. He's phenomenal. The reason that we had, in our game development program, there are certain components, pitching, catching, all that. We had the strength and conditioning component of our development program. What everybody bought into it in Europe, everybody, and the players, because of Jeff's program. Jeff was the one that developed it. And it was a turnkey. It's a turnkey program. You can implement it in Holland. You can implement it in Germany. You can implement. And if you have the strength coaches that were teaching Jeff's program, that's a perfect example of a program that is general, that you can plug in anywhere. And that's what we need in coaching. That's what we need.
And I'm so happy you brought that up, because that's when I asked about, in the coaching programs, what's important, boy, I got to believe that's the most important, because of the fact that if kids aren't strong enough, because we're talking about developing kids long-term, if they're not strong enough, one, they're going to get hurt. Two, how are they going to develop a certain skill when they won't allow them to do it? And, talks about, and folks, you can go to crushperformance.com. Jeff Groeschel, a great friend, does an awesome job, as Danny mentioned. If you're not strong in certain areas, if you can't move right, you don't have agility. And that's why I think in Italy or in Europe, they do have a little bit of advantage if they're playing a little bit of soccer.
Yeah, right.
It kind of coordinates that, the body better.
Yeah, absolutely. It really does. And, you instead of just having kids run and throw when they're 12 years old, they're not even done developing yet. Their growth plates are still open. You can really hurt young players that way. And they would stress strength, agility, nutrition, that kind of stuff. And then when you get to a certain age, then you can start throwing. Then you can start doing more, targeted exercises and things like that.
And that gives us, we got about 5 minutes, Danny. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me, Pete.
But that actually brings up a good point, because, remember, we're talking about always developing players long-term. Well, in order to develop them long-term, we got to keep them safe also. And this all does that.
Right.
All right, listen, let's jump to this. It'll be a little fun. Last 5 minutes. Major League Baseball, I got a feeling one day, because as you mentioned, there are already games in Europe, MLB games with Major League teams, the Yankees, the Cubs were supposed to play there. The future, hopefully, you never know. We might have a European team, right? A Major League team based in Europe one day.
Yeah, who knows? Who knows? I mean, London is a phenomenal market. It's a pretty easy
there, right? I mean, you were in London for the games. I mean, that was like 2000, I think.
Oh, it was huge. Yeah, it was great. And then the British are really big sports fans. They love it. They love an event. That like the NFL plays a bunch of games there. The Yankees and the Red Sox it's packed. People everywhere. They love it. They have the infrastructure too. They've got really nice, professional, big venues. And so I don't know. That's way out of my, but I mean, NBA's talking about it. It's a little bit easier for them because of basketball court.
And travel could be an issue there. You're going 8 hours. Mexico and some other areas might be able to make a little bit more sense.
Yeah.
Let me throw this at you. A little bit about the game that's going on right now as far as Major League. Kind of fun. And get your opinion, what you think on all of these. I'll just throw them at you and you just mention what you think. DH. Sure. DH for the whole league. Like it? Don't like it? Why?
I don't like personally. I don't like it.
But
I like there's because of the strategy aspect. You know, I mean, we grew up, obviously the young people will probably say, oh no, I just want to see, home runs. You
Right.
know, I like to see situations where, okay, you're in this, late innings and, you got a guy on base and you need the run and you got your pitcher coming up and he's pitching a pretty decent game, and you got to get that run in and the other pitcher's pitching a good game too. What do?
Yeah.
You just let them hit, you bunt them, you pinch hit them. What are you going to do? You got to bunt, you got to do something. You want to leave them in, you got to do something. You got to keep them in.
That
If
keeps
you have a DH, I mean, I don't know. Anyway, that's the way I look at it.
all right, that's fine. That's what's great about this show, right? I mean, we want to get people's opinions and why. Let's talk about man on second base, extra inning rule, something that was implemented in 2008 in the Olympics with the WBSC at the time. But
Yeah.
we had reasons for that. Now
Yeah.
it's implemented MLB. There was a reason, right?
Yep.
Because of games and the lack of spring training. But what do you think? Take it forward, or it's good for what it was just good for the times?
Yeah, I don't know. I think what the deal is in that is I get it. I understand it because of the time factor. They're trying to speed up the game, and do things like that, which I get it because, people have short attention spans now.
Right.
They want to see, yeah, me too. But, they want to see, they don't want to sit and watch a 5-hour game. You know what I mean? So they got to try to do something to speed it up. I understand it.
All right, bring in a relief. Would you? Well, first of all, would you? I guess I should have asked it. Would you take that extra inning rule into next year? The pressure's on.
Yeah, I think so because the trend is to speed it up.
Yeah.
We're talking about guys are out there, they play so much and you're playing 13, 14, 15, 20 innings, then you got to play it the next day too. I mean, these guys are, they play a lot the way it is. You want to make sure everybody's, I don't know if that the safety factor, I don't know, Pete,
That's a great point. And I know when it first was implemented, first of all, it was for implementing the Olympics. I still remember all the criticism we received because, if you're a traditionalist, oh my goodness, you're changing the game. But there was a reason we did that at that time.
Right.
But it's interesting because, and maybe they didn't come out and say it, the coaches and players and managers, they didn't talk bad about it. Most of the managers I listened to on MLB Network or, being interviewed at first may not have liked it, but now they like it. I don't know what the overall consensus is.
Right.
What David Ross said, which I thought was interesting with the Cubs, manager of the Cubs who played for us, he said, it kind of showed us our weaknesses.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Because you don't bunt anymore, right? You don't,
right.
You don't steal, you don't hit and run. So some weaknesses, obviously, that might help him in the future.
Yeah, I bet the players like it because I mean, you guys, just say you're out there, it's a night game, and you got to play the next day too, and before it's just grinding on. The game is going forward, and you're getting you want to get it over with. I don't know. I look at it that way.
I'm really putting the pressure on you here. We got how about the relief pitchers now having to pitch the 3 batters no matter what when they come in, unless obviously it's the end of the inning.
Again, the strategy thing, I mean, if you want to have a guy come in and throw to one guy, instead of having a guy go in there and having to be in there for 3 guys. So what happens? He gets 3 solid hits and then he's got to come out anyway. I don't know. I think it's all about, for me, I'd like to see, I wasn't very fast. So the stealing part of it always scared me. The running part always scared me because I wasn't fast. But I mean, you got guys on base, you have fast guys on base. They're dangerous.
Right.
And they scare you. They're stealing bases, you're bunting, you're hitting and running, all kinds of stuff's happening when people start running and they're fast. And now it seems like, guys are, they put the shift on and, guys aren't butting into the hole. They're just trying to hit into the shift. I don't know. I like the strategy aspect of baseball for me. And, wherever there's more strategy implemented, I like it.
Hey, I'm going to give a shout out to my good friend who does the announcing with the WBSC, announces the, Premier 12, the Olympics. He, former Dodger and Yankee announcer. But I'm going to give a shout out because, Michael Carlucci, our good friend, he doesn't, he kind of jumps at the show at the end, and then he asks the question, how come I can't see you? I can't see Danny. He wasn't there at the beginning when I said, Dan is on YouTube. Go to Peter Caliendo, Mr. Carlucci, at YouTube, and you could see Danny all you want. How's that? Pleasure seeing me. You know that Mr. Carlucci and I have done a lot of shows together, even on his show.
That's great.
We have a lot of fun. But listen, and the other thing is, how about, and when we talk about three, and we're almost done, Dan, I took you a little long.
No, I appreciate it, Pete.
When we talk about the three batter rule, if they keep it, it's going to change the whole game because now you got to train your pitchers differently, which is fine. You're going to have to train them because you're going to have a lot more guys coming in who could pitch to righties and lefties. You're not going to have all these lefty specialists anymore or the right hander, whatever it is. So it's going to change the game. So I'm sure they're going to have to decide, do they want to continue that because the overall game will be changing and the development of their players will change also. Yeah. What else do we got? One area that how about the electronic strike zone? That's coming.
I was gonna mention that. I read your mind. I was thinking, you know what? Yeah, I mean, if it's so important to call balls and strikes in the proper way, why not just do it that way? Have the umpire be behind there, go by the electric where the ball is, and just say, okay, it's a strike or a ball, and it's automatic, and the umpire can call. If the guy slides it home and he's safe or out, he does the judgment calls like that.
You for that?
I like it. I'm for it. I like that. I like, you do all the instant replay stuff. They're looking at, if the guy's safe or out at first base, there's cameras everywhere. How many calls get overturned? Mm-hmm. I think it's the same thing, especially for a pitcher. So let's say a pitcher's getting, he's getting nickeled and dimed back there. He's throwing balls on, that are strikes. The umpire's not calling them. Or a ball and he calls it a strike. What's the difference? Then calling a guy, they say, we're going to protest that and see, let's see if he was safe or not, instant replay. Yeah. What's the difference? It's easier, I think, to, determine a ball and a strike electronically. And it's not going to waste any time. Because as it is now, they're going and reviewing plays all the time. So, and it takes time, right? So I'm not taking anything away from the umpires because they're fantastic. It's really hard. That's a fast game, boy. That's hard. That's a tough job. That's a tough job. I don't think
people realize how tough it is in MLB. The speed of the game to make
that level. Home plate. Forget it.
When you see the instant replays, how good they are at it. I mean, you're gonna miss some, of course. And everybody's gonna miss one or two, but how good they are. And that's why I like the instant replay. And I'll tell you why. I'm with you, folks. Don't quit the show just because you're a purist. And maybe I might be saying here that I like the instant replay. I like the automatic strike zone. And I'll tell you why, because it's a competitive game. It's a game. It does involve money, whether you like it or not, because players, one, want to win. I mean, that's a goal. And two, it affects their lives. They want to make money at it. And when there's calls that, especially in the playoffs, one pitch can make a huge difference. Yeah. At least if you do have a consistent strike zone. And that's the big question is electronically, if it is consistent, Danny, we don't know yet.
Right.
But if it is
true,
that's going to help the game overall, because I'll tell you what, I think it's not a great example of what young kids see sometimes, because you see guys arguing with the umpire balls and strikes, and they look at them, weird, and, or you're coming around, you hit a home run, you come around and you come to home plate and you just said something to them after you hit a home run, even because you didn't like one of the pitches. I just think that's not good for the game. And I think that'll change because you're not gonna be able to argue balls and strikes because you can't do it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
What else you got? Anything else for us in the game?
Well, we're hoping and praying that everybody's safe and that this pandemic thing is, it's got everybody so sideways. And I just hope everybody's is healthy and safe. And, hopefully when things open up again, this is temporary. It's been a long, grinding year, pretty cruel and brutal overall. But when it opens up, I think people are going to hit the ground running, and I think it's going to be a big year. Once this thing, the vaccines are coming out now, we're going to be able to start playing, more, get outside more, play baseball, play basketball, play football. We're going to get out, do things. Kids will go back to school. And I think I think everybody's going to be really enthusiastic about getting back outside and getting back to normal,
Absolutely.
and for everybody that's involved in baseball and sport and every aspect of life, it's going to be, we need it. We really need to get our footing back and get back on track and get back to normal.
Absolutely. And I love what's been going around the world. People, federations, the WBSC, MLB, they still continue to do things, the best you can online, educating
Yeah.
coaches, educating players, whether it's Major League Baseball, whoever it may be, constant, training for everybody, because you got to keep it going, right? You got to keep learning constantly. So
Absolutely.
Danny, awesome, man. This has been fantastic. I got to thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Pete. I really appreciate it. Really appreciate the consideration. Thanks.
Hang tight 1 second, Danny. That's Dan Bonanno with Major League Baseball consultant for game development. Don't forget also my buddy Michael Carlucci's on there. Check him out on the bottom line, right? Mr. Carlucci. I hope I said that right. Check him out. His show, fantastic show. Folks, thanks for joining us. I'm Pete Caliendo. Don't forget, go to Facebook. You can check the show out there, but do us a favor. Just go to YouTube, Peter Caliendo, and also Baseball Podcast is baseballoutsidethebox.com. Subscribe to both of those. That helps the show really get out there in the U.S. and around the world. Again, show dedicated to our good friend, Bill Holmberg. God bless him. Rest in peace, our good friend. Special guest, Danny Bonanno, MLB. And I am your host, Pete Caliendo. As Danny said, stay safe. And then Carlucci reminds me, the bottom line. Yes, the bottom line. What did I say? I said the bottom line, Mr. Carlucci. All right, stay safe, stay healthy, and you'll get back on the field soon. God bless everybody. We'll see you on the next show.
Thanks.